This judicial selection needs more than a tweak. The collegium system and the mysteries underlining its decision-making dilute the importance of the high courts. In recent weeks, the Supreme Court of India's collegium has been busy. New judges have been appointed to the court on its advice and long overdue vacancies have been filled up. Now, after a meeting held on September 16, the body has made proposals to alter the existing composition of various high courts. When these recommendations are notified, new chief justices will be appointed to as many as 8 different courts. 5 existing chief justices will swap positions with others, and a slew of point judges will be moved to new courts. A need for transparency. These recommendations are seen as reflective of a new and proactive collegium. A resolve for swiftness is fine as far as it goes. Clearing up vacancies is a minimal requirement of a functioning system. What ought to concern us, though, is that long-standing apprehensions about the collegium's operation remain unaddressed, specifically, its opacity and the lack of independent scrutiny of its decisions. These misgivings are usually seen in the context of a battle between the executive and the judiciary. Less evident is the effect that the failings have on the status of the high courts. Today, even without express constitutional sanction, the collegium effectively exercises a power of supervision over each of the high courts. For nearly 2 years, despite vacancies on the bench, the collegium made no recommendations for appointments to the Supreme Court. The conjecture in the press was that this logjam owed to a reluctance amongst some of its members to elevate Justice Akhil Qureshi to the court. Indeed, it was only after a change in its composition that the panel recommended on August 17 a list of names for elevation. This list did not contain Justice Qureshi's name. The perfunctory nature of the collegium's resolutions means that we do not know the reasons for his exclusion. We also do not know why 5 chief justices, including Justice Qureshi, and several other point judges are now being transferred to different courts. This is not to suggest that these decisions are unfounded. It is possible that each of the choices made is predicated on administrative needs. But whatever the rationale, surely the public has a right to know. The middle course. Separation of powers is a bedrock principle of Indian constitutionalism. Inherent in that idea is the guarantee of an autonomous judiciary. To that end, the process of appointing and transferring judges assumes salience. But the question of how to strike a balance between the sovereign function of making appointments and the need to ensure an independent judiciary has long plagued the Republic. The Constitution's framers wrestled over the question for many days. Ultimately, they adopted what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar described as a middle course. Taliban want to address the world at UN. In a letter to Guterres, Taliban nominates spokesman Suhail Shaheen as Afghanistan's UN ambassador. Reuters. United Nations. The Taliban have asked to address world leaders at the United Nations in New York this week and nominated their Doha-based spokesman Suhail Shaheen as Afghanistan's UN ambassador, according to a letter seen by Reuters on Tuesday. Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi made the request in a letter to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Monday. Muttaqi asked to speak during the annual high-level meeting of the General Assembly, which finishes on Monday. Mr. Guterres' spokesperson, Farhan Haq, confirmed Muttaqi's letter. The move sets up a showdown with Ghulam Ishaqzai, the UN ambassador in New York representing Afghanistan's government ousted last month by the Taliban. Mr. Haq said the rival requests for Afghanistan's UN seat had been sent to a 9-member credentials committee, whose members include the United States, China, and Russia. The committee is unlikely to meet on the issue before Monday, so it is doubtful that the Taliban foreign minister will address the world body. Eventual UN acceptance of the ambassador of the Taliban would be an important step in the hardline Islamist group's bid for international recognition, which could help unlock badly needed funds for the cash-strapped Afghan economy. Only leverage. Mr. Guterres has said that the Taliban's desire for international recognition is the only leverage other countries have to press for inclusive government and respect for rights, particularly for women, in Afghanistan. The Taliban letter said Mr. Ishaqzai's mission is considered over and that he no longer represents Afghanistan, said Haq. Until a decision is made by the Credentials Committee, Mr. Ishaqzaei will remain in the seat, according to the General Assembly rules. He is currently scheduled to address the final day of the meeting on September 27, but it was not immediately clear if any countries might object in the wake of the Taliban letter. The committee traditionally meets in October or November to assess the credentials of all UN members before submitting a report for General Assembly approval before the end of the year. The committee and General Assembly usually operate by consensus on credentials, diplomats said. Other members of the committee are the Bahamas, Bhutan, Chile, Namibia, Sierra Leone, and Sweden. In US, Gotabaya promises to engage Tamil diaspora. President's offer sparks skepticism among Tamils. Meera Srinivasan. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's recent statement in New York that he would invite the Tamil diaspora for discussions on resolving pending questions of wartime accountability and justice in the island nation has sparked more skepticism than hope among Tamils. In a meeting on Sunday with the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres at the UN headquarters, President Rajapaksa, who is attending the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, said internal issues of Sri Lanka should be resolved through an internal mechanism of the country. The Tamil diaspora would be invited for discussions in this regard, he said, according to a media release his office. The announcement is significant, coming from President Rajapaksa, whose government prescribed several Tamil diaspora organizations 6 months ago, branding their members terrorists. The Rajapaksa administration has repeatedly referred to diaspora groups as pro-LTTE outfits, often accusing them of attempting to revive the Tigers' separatist struggle. Welcome gesture. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa wanting to engage with the Tamil diaspora is certainly a progressive move and we welcome it, said Surendran, spokesman of the Global Tamil Forum, GTF, a diaspora group with members across North America, Europe, the UK, Australia, and South Africa. When requests are made by democratically elected representatives of Tamil people in Sri Lanka to meet with the president, they are deferred with flimsy excuses, and, now from New York, he has declared that he wants to engage with us, Tamil diaspora, Mr. Surendran said in a statement, questioning President Rajapaksa's sudden change of mind, months after his government prescribed organizations including the GTF. In June, Mr. Rajapaksa was scheduled to meet a delegation of the Tamil National Alliance, TNA, the largest parliamentary grouping representing Tamils of the war-affected North and East. The announcement of the meeting drew much attention, for it was the first time that the president was going to meet the TNA, led by the 88-year-old veteran leader and Trincomalee district parliamentarian Asam Pintan, who has been demanding a political solution to the Tamil question through substantive constitutional reform. But the meeting was postponed with no announcement yet on a likely new date for talks. Meanwhile, political observers see little reason for optimism in the president's possible discussion with Tamil diaspora. Describing Mr. Rajapaksa's recent remark in New York a diversionary tactic, senior journalist and political commentator Veetana Balsingam said although Tamil diaspora groups have been backing the call for a political solution to Sri Lanka's Tamil national question, they are no cohesive political force. Biden speaks to Macron to smooth tensions. French Ambassador Philippe Etienne to return to Washington next week. Sri Ramalakshman, Washington. France's ambassador to the US, Philippe Etienne, will return to Washington next week. This was announced after US President Joe Biden spoke to his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, on Wednesday. This was the first call between the two leaders after a falling out over the September 15 announcement of a trilateral security partnership, AUKUS, between Australia, the UK and the US, which led France to recall its envoys to the US and Australia. The call was initiated at Mr. Biden's request, a joint statement said. It is quite rare for statements to specify who initiated the call and suggests the Biden administration is engaged in significant damage control with the US's oldest ally. The AUKUS pact was worked out behind closed doors and came as a surprise to other nations, enraging Mr. Macron. The French said the establishment of AUKUS had significantly disrupted their plans in the Indo-Pacific and also had come at a hefty price tag. France and Australia signed a $66 billion deal in 2016 under which Australia got diesel-electric submarines. Australia is now exiting that deal as a result of AUKUS, whose main deliverable, for now, is providing Australia with a fleet of superior submarines that run on nuclear fuel. Open consultation. The two leaders agreed that the situation would have benefited from open consultations among allies on matters of strategic interest to France and our European partners. President Biden conveyed his ongoing commitment in that regard, the statement said. Mr. Etienne will begin intensive work with U.S. officials when he gets back next week, the White House said, to build confidence between the two countries, whose leaders will next meet in Glasgow at the UN Conference on Climate. President Biden reaffirms the strategic importance of French and European engagement in the Indo-Pacific region, including in the framework of the European Union's recently published strategy for the Indo-Pacific, the joint statement said, presumably responding to a statement from French officials calling for greater strategic autonomy for Europe following the AUKUS announcement. Wednesday's statement also said that Mr. Biden recognized the importance of a more capable and strong European defense contributing to transatlantic and global security and complementing NATO.